First of all, I'll introduce myself. My name is Nathan White. I am a health and wellness consultant with Ever Active Schools. And we are working in collaboration to present these presentations on the new curriculum and kind of different ways to look at it. There's been sessions on financial literacy, on year planning, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about assessment. So excited to do that. A little bit of my background: I taught for 5 years, phys ed, among many other subjects. Took a very keen interest on kind of daily physical activity, implementing physical education principles into the more academic classroom, and kind of how that could benefit students' wellness. And now I'm working for Ever Active, supporting healthy school communities. Got to spend my summer diving into the curriculum, which is why I'm presenting this to you right now, because I was able to take that deep dive. But love what I do, love supporting healthy schools, and like all of you, I'm sure see the value of having healthy school communities and healthy students. So excited to share some ways we can do that through assessment today. So these presentations are being facilitated through the Alberta Regional Professional Development Consortia in partnership with Healthy Schools Lab and Ever Active Schools. I do want to acknowledge the land. I am coming to you today from Treaty 6 territory. I'm very grateful for this land. I'm very grateful for the folks that have been on this land for time immemorial. I'm very lucky in my job that I get to travel quite a bit. And I've been able to chat with some folks and learn some things that have been very, very impactful. In particular, how we can respect the land. Really, really powerful piece of advice. If you are taking anything from the land, it's best to give back. How you give back can be in a variety of different ways. I know there's folks that will actually, give some sort of plant back to the earth if they take some away. So that's a really good principle, and something as someone who's an avid hiker and loves the backcountry, something has caused me to reflect on how I treat this land. But do just want to acknowledge that this land is the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux peoples, as well as the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Just want to acknowledge that we are on that land. And that land is sacred, and I'm grateful for the teachings that come from the folks that have been here for a long, long time. Great. So today's session, we're going to be talking about assessment. So for the first bit of the session, we're going to do a quick review of the framework of the new phys ed and wellness curriculum. For some of you, I might be preaching to the choir. For other folks, it might be really good to kind of just get a quick overview of the structure of the curriculum, or just maybe see some things that you didn't notice before. Once we do that, we're going to go through some of the learning outcomes, talk about how we can dissect learning outcomes. I'm going to give you a kind of a strategy and a toolkit to dissect learning outcomes and kind of implement that into assessment. And then at the end, we're going to talk about rubrics and talk about how you can create your own rubrics, create your own student-centered rubrics, and create kind of positive rubrics that even on the lower level of outcomes, are still motivate students and kind of maintain that positivity and motivation. So that is the plan for today. So let's just quickly give an overview of the new curriculum, what it's all about, its philosophy, its structure. So let's chat a little bit about the philosophy of this new curriculum. So the physical education and wellness curriculum, it aims to promote the development of the whole individual. So essentially what we've taken is we've taken the phys ed curriculum, we've taken the health curriculum, we've kind of mashed them together to create a curriculum that promotes the development of the whole individual and nurture their lifelong pursuit of a healthy and active lifestyle. Not their school year long pursuit of a healthy lifestyle, but their lifelong pursuit of that. Essentially giving them the tools to be well for their lives. Here you see this little graphic. This graphic is meant to illustrate that all of these organizing ideas that exist within the curriculum are meant to be connected to each other. And this is kind of stated in the front matter of the curriculum. Essentially, we have these 8 organizing ideas. Some are more phys ed focused, some are more wellness focused, but they are meant to kind of create this whole well-being kind of model. So the curriculum in the front matter, it kind of separates it into two. We have our physical education outcomes, we have our wellness education outcomes. Physical education is more kind of hands-on. It's developing physical literacy, it's developing fundamental movement skills. It's giving meaningful learning opportunities to develop their personal and social skills. One thing that's interesting about this curriculum is we've taken a lot of kind of the soft things we used to teach in phys ed and just made them more explicit outcomes. So really good example of that is safety, where safety is not like safety wasn't included in the old curriculum, but now safety is an entire organizing idea. And as physical educators, we are constantly teaching safety, but now we can link that directly to outcomes. And that safety that we're teaching can now be kind of reported on rather than just being something that goes along with our physical education. And we want them to, in the physical education component, interact with various outdoor and alternative learning environments, which we know is really important as we give kids toolkits to be active for life. And then wellness education is kind of, we're taking a lot of the content from the old health curriculum here and helping students to understand themselves, understand their communities, make informed decisions. This is their social emotional wellness, positive mental health, learning about basic health practices and decision making related to personal growth, and understanding the importance of consent, mutual respect, dignity, and responsibility. So really teaching them how to be, human beings who are well, human beings who can support their own wellness, the wellness of others, and be successful. So that is kind of the philosophy behind the new curriculum framework. We're going to rip through this pretty quick. So we could see it's kind of cascading down. We're going to go through these in a bit more detail. So we start with our organizing ideas. These are our big pictures. We have 8 of them: active living, movement skill development, character development, safety, healthy eating, healthy relationships, growth and development, and financial literacy. These are our organizing ideas, and these are our big pictures, which will guide our instruction of the curriculum. Guiding questions and learning outcomes. I put these together on one slide because they're very similar. The guiding question in a lot of ways are kind of the learning outcome framed as a question in many contexts. So how can problem solving support healthy relationships? That's a good question to ask. And as we talk about assessment, like you can think about what would my students say if I asked them this question as kind of just a big picture kind of holistic assessment. That's a good starting point for if I were to ask my student this question, how would they answer? And then the actual learning outcome would be students describe how problem solving can affect healthy relationships. So that is your learning outcome. That's what we're mandated to report on, and that's the kind of the ultimate outcome that that Alberta Ed wants our students to achieve. I will mention for each organizing idea, there is generally speaking one learning outcome, with the exception of movement skill development, which has 3. And eventually growth and development gains another learning outcome in Div 2 from grades 4 to 6. So that is something to be aware of. And again, if a new curriculum is if it's feeling kind of overwhelming, a good place to kind of start and reassure yourself a little bit is just know that for most organizing ideas, we just have one learning outcome that we need to focus on. And that kind of makes it feel a bit smaller and more manageable. Under our learning outcomes, we have what's called knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures. If you don't take anything else from this session, if you hear people talk about cusps, it's your knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures. There's a few of these for each learning outcome. And basically, I like to view this as kind of like a Bloom's taxonomy type deal, where we have our knowledge, which is just our very basic understanding. We have our understanding, which is the application of that knowledge to certain situations. We have our skills and procedures, which is when a student actually does something to demonstrate that they have that knowledge and understanding. So that's kind of how these are broken down. We're going to look at these in the website in 1 second here. And progressions. I wouldn't worry too much about progressions as far as being mandated to teach. These are a combination of knowledge, skills, and characteristics that come from the Alberta government that apply to the entire, to all the curricula. So these are kind of big picture learning outcomes that transcend the individual curriculums and are kind of big picture skills and competencies that the government wants our students to have. So competency is kind of your general life skills, literacy and numeracy. I mean, you're educators. I don't need to tell you about what literacy and numeracy are. And these progressions live within the curriculum website, and I'm going to show you where they are because they give you actually really great ideas for cross-curricular. Progressions are going to give you really great ideas for cross-curricular connections. I'm going to show you where they live on the curriculum website because they're a little bit hidden. I want to share these with you to kind of support you and give you some ideas for how to use this website to your advantage as you plan. So here we are in the Learn Alberta website. Okay, we're going to click on Alberta's kindergarten to grade 6 curriculum. Okay, here's our curriculum. Now, first of all, I will notice those progressions I was just talking about are at the bottom down here. Okay, so you can see those. We won't dive into those just yet. So we're going to click on the physical education and wellness tab here. Okay, here we are, physical education and wellness. The first thing I'm going to point out, if you're like me, you learn better with physical paper in front of you. I'm going to give you some tips about printing this curriculum. So if you're going to print it, click your little printer here. And when I printed all 6 grades or all 7 grades at once, I became a little bit overwhelmed the way the format worked. There's just a lot of content in one spot. I highly recommend, even if you're teaching multiple grades, I highly recommend you just print one page at a time. I find the curriculum to be way more digestible that way and way easier to interpret. So I recommend printing one grade at a time. Even when I was going through the curriculum this summer, I actually went and just checked each one individually and printed each one individually rather than printing them all at once. And I found that to be hugely helpful for kind of the formatting and just having a more concise document for each grade level. So that is my recommendation for printing. And that's your handy dandy printer up there. One thing, and I'm probably going to say this a few times, but if there's one thing that you take from today's presentation or one little life hack that you gain about navigating this website, it's when you hover over the learning outcome, this little eye is going to appear. Okay. This is really important. And actually, just so we get really some really populated content, I'm going to hop over to grade 6 or grade 5 here. So when you hover over it, you're going to see a little eye there, okay? And when you click on this eye, it's going to take you to kind of the back end of the curriculum. So I click this eye here, boom, I'm in the back end now. So what you'll see here is going to give you all of the knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures for this outcome. And these other tabs are really important too. So we're going to have a resources tab, okay? We looked at resources. Competency, literacy, and numeracy progressions. These are kind of these big picture outcomes I was talking about from Alberta Ed. So that's the website, little tour. Hope you saw some tips and tricks that you weren't aware of before. Something I will mention too, if you click the little explore resources on the left-hand side, it'll give you all of the resources that Alberta Ed has accumulated as connections to all curriculums. There's 1,007 of them. So it's good. If you're feeling stuck for resources, this is a good place to check out. So that's the website in a nutshell. So that's just kind of a brief overview, recap of the new curriculum. Now let's talk about some assessment within that curriculum. Now, I am approaching this session from a standpoint that, you're all educators. You all know a thing or two about assessment. So with that being said, we're going to talk about how some tools to have in your toolkit to assess and explore learning outcomes. But also, I'm going to give you a bit of a platform today to break down some learning outcomes within the new curriculum. So I invite you to keep that website open. Get a piece of paper and a pen if you have one, because I'm going to be asking you to kind of follow along with your own selected learning outcomes as we go through these processes. Okay. Good. So let's explore the learning outcomes through the lens of assessment, and let's talk about what we want our students to be able to do through these learning outcomes, what we want them to be able to know, what we want them to be able to do, what we want them to be able to understand. So this is the model that we're going to use today. So this model comes from a gentleman named Joey Fife from Eastern Canada, just a very excellent individual who knows a lot. He has a website at physicaleducator.com. Highly recommend checking it out. It's a great website, but he's the one that kind of came up with this model. and it's a model that is really good for breaking down curricular outcomes. So as we look at different outcomes, we're going to be using this model to kind of break them down. So we're going to circle action statements within the learning outcomes. We're going to underline the content that needs to be learned. We're going to box the context. And then we're going to examine or simplify for clarification. And when we talk about the E there, that E is mostly going to be kind of examples of what you might do within the curriculum, within your classroom activities or classroom context. Okay. So we will get started. We'll look at some kindergarten examples. Okay. What I've put on the screen too is just a nice little summary of your learning outcomes for kindergarten. So again, like I mentioned, there's for most organizing ideas, there's only one learning outcome. So what's really nice here is like I have put in one page here all of your learning outcomes for kindergarten. It doesn't feel like, first of all, I'm not going to discount, implementing a new curriculum is a lot, and it's a lot of work, and it can feel overwhelming at times. I've been in that situation. I mean, I think about my teaching context. I taught in 7 different I was teaching in a secondary context, and I taught in 7 different department areas. And I often felt the burden of learning a new curriculum. I understand that it's a lot. It feels intimidating. I find comfort in looking at this one page and seeing that we have all of our learning outcomes in a concise format here. So these are our kindergarten learning outcomes. So what we're going to do is we're going to break down a few of these. Okay. My invitation to you right now, I'm going to give you a moment to do this. Go into the kindergarten program of studies on the website we were just on and find a learning outcome that is not this learning outcome. Okay. So I have chosen the healthy relationships outcome. I will invite you to find an outcome that is not this outcome and then follow along. All right. So hopefully you have your outcome kind of selected. So the first thing you're going to do is circle the action statement. And for those of you that teach English, and for those of you, well, for everyone, we know the action statement is the verb. So we're going to find the verb. Now, examine is a word you are going to find all of the time in this curriculum. Examine is all over this curriculum, which is interesting because examine is kind of a broad word. What does examining look like? Well, examining can look like a lot of different things. And a lot of times, the way that I interpret examine, the way that you interpret examine is going to depend on our context, on our environment. Examine can mean a lot of things. Sometimes your knowledge, your CUSPs, your knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures will sometimes guide you towards what that examining looks like. But it's broad, and I think there's some intent behind that broadness, knowing that you can adapt what examine means based on your context. So our action statement's pretty clear here. It's examine. So you can find the action statement in your on your outcome. Healthy relationships is the content. So we're teaching about what healthy relationships are. We're teaching about what a healthy relationship looks like. That's the content. So we're teaching our little kinders, what does it mean to have a healthy relationship? What does it mean to have a positive relationship? And our context is learning and playing environments, which is going to be in many cases their classroom and recess. And sometimes even outside the classroom, which we'll discuss a little bit today. How do you assess some of these outcomes that are going to be occurring outside the classroom? And when it's examine for clarification, that E, what we're doing there is we're basically just putting examples of what that might look like. So to clarify, what is a learning and playing environment? Well, it's a classroom, it's recess, it's playing with their siblings at home. It's learning and playing environments. There's plenty of examples, but that's kind of the clarification is what's an example of a learning and playing environment. So this is kind of our first little breakdown of the outcome. And already we're seeing, like when I started doing these, I started already thinking deeper about these outcomes and what they could look like in an assessment, from an assessment point of view. Okay, so let's go a step further. So we have our action statement, examine, our content pieces. We're teaching about healthy relationships, learning context, learning environments, and playing environments. So when we talk about planning assessment, we know we've got to build, like assessments like building blocks, right? We got to start with kind of our knowledge, build to our understanding, and then eventually lead to our the actual demonstration of that understanding through action. So as you do this, you're really seeing that action, and you can start to plan your content block planning. So this content block planning section, there's not really a process to this. This is going to depend on your personal preference as a teacher, but this is kind of, you can look at these, okay, and say, okay, I need kids to examine. I know the context needs to be learning and playing environments. I know I need to teach about healthy relationships. Now, how can I progress this? I've done this in a really simple way. You could definitely do this in a much deeper way yourself, but block one is just going to be examining healthy relationships, teaching kids about healthy relationships, and just giving them that knowledge, right? That knowledge, and helping them understand that they can have healthy relationships. And again, those I can statements are important. We'll talk about those in a sec as well. And then block two of that unit, you can now have them actually examine healthy relationships. You can give them examples. They can apply that knowledge of what a healthy relationship is to different situations that are given to them. And then you're leveling up their learning a little bit. And then for block three, they can now make it more personal and make it more kinesthetic and actual, rather than just understanding hypothetical situations. You can actually have them analyze real situations. For a kindergartner, that's obviously might look like, examining social situations within the classroom, looking at, real life examples of healthy relationships, things like that within their own environment. And then they can demonstrate that they know what a healthy relationship is through their action because you've taught them about it. And that's how you could kind of block that unit around healthy relationships. So we've really just kind of dissected the learning outcome and really thought about what the outcome is asking us to teach and have them be able to do. So let's move on to grade one. Here are all of your grade one outcomes. I will invite you to select a grade one learning outcome to do this activity together. So here they all are. And you can pick an outcome that is not movement skill development. So I've taken one of the three movement skill developments here as our example. Okay. So our C, we're going to circle the action statement to demonstrate. To demonstrate. So this is our action word. So demonstrate to me implies a very kind of kinesthetic process where they're actually demonstrating something and showing you rather than, showing you in a very like kind of real context rather than just knowing it. But again, these action words all have some, they're all pretty broad. What does it mean to demonstrate? Well, kids can demonstrate things in a lot of different ways. How they demonstrate is kind of up to, in a lot of ways, your professional judgment as an educator. So demonstrates are active, our action statement, what we want kids to be able to do. The content is movement. We're teaching them how to move their bodies. We're teaching them about what movement is and what different movement skills are. And the context is different types of physical activity. And this is so important in phys ed, is exposing them to different types of physical activity. Because we know that not every kid is going to fall in love with soccer. Not every kid is going to fall in love with basketball. Kid might fall in love with running. Kid might fall in love with yoga, right? So we want to have those different types of physical activity. So what can this look like? Well, our action statement is demonstrate. So to show something off. Our content pieces are movement skills, teaching them how to move. And our learning context is all sorts of different types of physical activity. So block one of the unit, you could start by having them demonstrate their knowledge of different movement skills. Well, what is it? Do they have the knowledge of what a throw is? Do they have a knowledge of what it means to catch? Do they have a knowledge of what it means to run, right? Do they have a knowledge of what goes into running, kind of the different technical pieces, moving your arms, the rhythm of running, things like that? Do they have that knowledge? Once they have that knowledge, they can demonstrate that. They can show that to you, all right? And then in block three, once they have that understanding, then you can start to move into demonstrating that movement through a variety of different types of physical activity. So now, can you run in this context and run in that context and also understand the differences. Maybe you have to run differently in certain contexts. And can they demonstrate that like within your classroom, within a physical education context? Moving into grade 2 now, okay? Here are all of our outcomes for grade 2, okay? And again, I hope you're finding some comfort in seeing all of these learning outcomes on one page, knowing that, we have a whole year to teach all of these learning outcomes, and how we do that is going to be a bit variable, but it's doable. So here's grade 2. Okay, this is the outcome I'm going to do. Safety. Okay. So safety. So I invite you to take a outcome from grade 2 and do this process for yourself. So circle the action statement, underline the content, box the context. So in this one here, we actually see that we have 2 action words. Okay. We have 2 action words, and we have a variety of situations. Again, one thing about this curriculum that many of you have probably already noticed is that there is a lot of broadness to it. Like this curriculum isn't super like gonna hold your hand through absolutely what you must do. It's going to trust your professional judgment a lot, and it's going to trust your professional repertoire a lot. Like when it says variety of situations, that's the context. What are those variety of situations? Well, that's again going to depend on your own context and your own, what you're teaching, who you're teaching, where you're teaching. So safety. Our action statements are examine and apply. So we want to make sure our students are examining and applying, right? It sounds super simple, but in our assessment, we really want to focus on those action words. And one thing I do quite like about this curriculum is that word examine. Based on current research, we know that examining things is so important rather than just giving them binary good, bad type things, right? So safety is a really, really good example. We know that we're teaching them about personal safety, but we're inviting them to examine and apply those. So we're inviting them we're not just straight up telling them, and we will have to sometimes, but we're not just like, you must never do this, you must always do this. We're asking them to look at situations and examine them and come to their conclusions, right? Now, don't get me wrong, as an educator, if a kid comes to the conclusion that playing with rusty nails is a good idea, then we're gonna have to correct that. But overall, kids are pretty smart, and if you give them the opportunity to examine certain situations, they can identify things. So this is a way I might teach this for content block planning, as far as kind of moving up, as far as different lower level learning to higher level learning. So block 1 of the unit, I might have them look at different situations that require safety and have them explore those in a very knowledge-based context where they're learning about, oh, this situation requires safety. And this can be within your phys ed activities. This can also be like occupational. You could teach them about, and this is within the curriculum, you can teach them about kind of what, what things as they go into the world, as they grow up, they need to be on the lookout for to keep themselves safe. So you can look at those different situations. You can then start to examine these different situations and apply safety knowledge to more specific situations. So they're taking those ideas that, what safety is and applying them to all sorts of different situations. And then for the last block of this teaching, this year planning, you might apply understanding and knowledge of personal safety to a variety of situations where you're giving them new situations, taking their knowledge of safety and having them apply that in a way that is tangible, that you can assess. So that's how you might plan that. Great. On to grade 4. Again, we see with grade 4, one thing I will point out that I mentioned earlier, you see that we've gained a learning outcome under growth and development as it becomes more developmentally appropriate. Okay. Okay, really simple outcome here. Or at least it appears to be simple. Although sometimes the less it gives you, the more complex it is, because it means that you need to come up with more. But the action statement is examine. Once we have factors that influence spending. So the factors are what we're teaching them about, and the spending is the context. So students examine factors that influence spending for grade 4. That's your whole learning outcome. The action statement is to examine. The content pieces are the factors, and the learning content is the spending, or the learning context, sorry, is the spending. So how might we organize this into a year plan? Our block one, or sorry, a unit plan. Block one might just be, again, looking at money, examining it. Block 2 might be examining the different contexts and situations that affect how you spend money or affect your decisions to spend money. And then your block 3 might be actually then putting students into those situations and them demonstrating that they know how factors are influencing their spending of money. Okay, a really good example is like if you start by teaching kids that money can be used to buy X thing. You go on to teach them that, different situations might affect how you think about buying that thing and whether or not you can buy that thing. And then block 3 would be actually putting them in that situation and seeing if they can apply that knowledge effectively. Explore rubrics a little bit, and let's explore evidence of learning. So one way you can do this when you're creating a rubric, you can break this down as you're creating rubrics for assessment. We'll look at some examples. You can break down, and this is kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. You could break down these outcomes into what can the student do? What does the student know? And what does the student understand? And a good way to remember this is what's in their head, what's in their heart, and what's in their hands. Head, heart, and hands. Okay. So here's a little table. And again, within your context, this is going to be very personalized to your specific teaching context. What can the student who met this outcome do? What are they able to do? What can they do? And what can they theoretically do based on their knowledge? I know, what does the student know in their brain? What exists in their brain? And understand, what does the student who met this outcome understand? And then your job as a teacher is to really put, how can the student demonstrate this learning? Like, what are things they can actually do? It's going to be very, very different based on your own personal context. So here is a rubric model that you could use, and we're going to talk about kind of the rubric that I'm going to show you. We know that phys ed is very, very observation based. So hopefully this rubric model will give you a tool to basically quickly create assessment pieces as you do observation-based assessment. So this is a way that I like this rubric model because it really shows you kind of a positive context. Not yet is a very positive way to kind of mark on the lowest possible outcome for the rubric. Not yet implies that you believe in that student. It implies that you believe that student has the capability to get it. And you'll see that the way that we write out outcomes in this rubric format is meant to support that positive idea. Getting there, getting close, got it, they've got it, and wow, above and beyond. Okay, so let's look at what this rubric could look like in the context of phys ed outcomes. Okay, so here's our learning roadmap. So again, we have not yet, getting there, got it, wow. So a good example here, so this could be used as a self-assessment. This could also be used as a teacher assessment as well. But I can choose and use manipulative skills and tactics in a variety of physical activity contexts, okay? But notice how it's written in the not yet section. I cannot yet choose and practice most useful manipulative skills. I do not yet know what a tactic is and how to choose one, okay? So the I can statements are what they're able to do. The I know statements are what the knowledge that exists in their brain. And the understanding is, how they apply that knowledge to their understanding. So again, we see here that I don't understand yet. Okay. And even if we go down here, I can choose and use problem solving strategies in order to cooperate and get along with others during physical education. We see here the way that this rubric is created. It's funny, this is really interesting. And when I was first experiencing this content, I had to take a look at the I can statement, and I really had to be like, wait, what's going on in the not yet? Because to me, this looks like a positive outcome on our lowest level. So it says, I can choose and use problem solving strategies in order to cooperate and get along with others during phys ed. So, but I'm like, okay, so we have I can here, but they haven't done it. But that's because the I can is the starting point of that they have the ability to do that. It's a belief in the student, right? So even if we circle the lowest denominator in the rubric, we're still believing that they can do that. And the ability, like the fact that they are able to do that, maybe they're not demonstrating yet, but we circle this on the rubric, and we are basically expressing a belief to them that they can do this. Okay. Whereas when we get to getting there, I can sometimes do that, right? Where now we're starting to see that, you know, they are demonstrating that sometimes. So, and the other thing too, we see here on the beginning is that you notice that the green here and the orange here look almost exactly the same, right? And we see here that this one here is with help from others, and this one here is just without help from others. Okay, great. So this is a really good rubric model. I will get some of these templates shared out to you through email. I know you registered, and we'll get those out to you. But these are just some tools you can have in your toolkit for assessing your students, breaking down learning outcomes, isolating those action words, creating positive rubrics that could be used for self-assessment or teacher assessment, and really giving them those opportunities for students to show and demonstrate to you that they're learning. One thing to keep in mind is that the wellness curriculum, a lot of those outcomes are actually going to live outside the classroom. Now, you can't follow kids home and see if they're applying those things at home, right? Similar to homework when it's assigned. So these rubrics can be really effective to give students for that kind of formative self-assessment where they are reflecting on what they're doing on their own time as well to support their wellness. Because a lot of these outcomes live outside the classroom, right? And that's just the reality of it. So yeah, that's just, I hope that gives you some tools. I hope the little tour of the website was helpful. I hope that you've thought about ways that you can kind of dissect these learning outcomes within the curriculum and apply that to your unit plans and your year plans, and some ideas for rubrics as well, creating rubrics. I mean, here's the thing, I know you've all created mini rubrics as physical educators. I just wanted to give you a bit of a different look at these rubrics, and especially for some of these outcomes that you know can appear to be not super specific. These formatted rubric can be really, really good.